Good afternoon and welcome to the Veterans Credit and Service Dates Forum. My name is Jolene Christensen and I will be your facilitator today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Our forum today is scheduled from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. and it is chock full of great information. So let's settle in and get started. First, we're going to go through the Cardinal service date enhancements, talk a little bit about the background, as well as show you a screenshot of the service date fields. Then we'll deep dive into each of the date fields, some of the specific new and revised fields. You saw this on the communication if you had an opportunity to read that. It was sent yesterday around 4 o'clock. Then we'll go into some of the service field impacts for absence management and start to step through some demos. Our first demonstration will be of the service date calculator. We'll go into two separate scenarios, having two demonstrations in both of those, both for adding veteran service credit to an existing employee and then adding previous months of service and veteran service credit to a rehire. We'll talk about the next steps for both HR and absence management administrators, including immediate actions that you need to take. We'll go through the options for agencies that need to conduct corrections, and we have both a demonstration on option 1, and then we'll review option 2. And then to finish it up, we'll finish out with questions and answers, resources, and additional support. So now I'm going to hand it over to Natalie Brannon, who has joined us from DHRM, and she's going to kick us off here. So thank you for joining us today, Natalie.
For having me. So first we want to talk about the enhancements that we've made to the Cardinal service date tied to this process. So to give you a little history for those who aren't aware, effective January 10th, 2023, we updated the annual leave policy to add credit to state service for veteran service in the military, National Guard, or reserves in establishing the accrual rate for annual leave. The intent is for this credit to apply only to the employee's annual leave accrual rate and their carryover or payout limitations. However, what we found in implementing is that it incorrectly impacted the VSDP and other leave balances, and the Cardinal year of service was also impacted. So with that, the Cardinal system has, we've implemented some modifications to the process and to track the veteran service credit separate from the previous state service. And with that, what we're going to speak to is that 3 new fields have been added to Cardinal to help facilitate this updated process. Agencies are going to be required to make changes to the job data, employment data page, and we're going to talk you through what's going to be needed to help facilitate that step for those employees who are receiving a veteran service credit. So let's cover the details.
All right, thank you, Natalie and Jolene. Today, I'm going to go through all the rest of this form with you guys. We're going to cover a lot of information. So it is important if you are HR and absence management administrators that you're paying attention, because we're going to go back and forth between HR's responsibilities as well as absence management responsibilities. And I do have with me today Susie Hilton, who's going to cover the absence management part. And when we switch off, we'll make sure that we let you guys know who's talking and who is going to be responsible for the adjustments and confirming the calculations. All right, so to get started, we have a screenshot of the employment information page, or at least a portion of it. There is some information missing from the top and the bottom if you are familiar with this page. But we have the bulk of the information, those dates that are, those fields that change, as well as the new fields that Natalie mentioned. To cover this page in its entirety, we do have a new job aid that is noted at the bottom, the HR 351. managing service dates and breaks in service job aid. That is located now on the Cardinal Project website. So if you have a chance after this forum, go ahead and download that new job aid and keep it on hand as you make these updates. Now, starting from the top of the page, our first important field is that VSDP, sick per leave effective date field. This is a new field that we have implemented in the Cardinal, and this field generates automatically by people code. And the field captures the eligibility date and populates the date in this field. I'm sorry, it captures the code that subtracts the months entered in the Veterans Service Credit Months field from the annual leave eligibility date field and populates that date. And this is the date that's going to generate over to absence management and will drive the amount of sick and personal leave entitlement for the employee. The next field we have is not a new field, but the title has been changed. It is the VSDP enroll date field. This field was housed in Peanuts and did convert into Cardinal. There's one thing that is important to note. This field does extract from Cardinal to VRS via the VNAV and also extracts to regroup. It is used to determine the original program enrollment date. Therefore, agencies should ensure its accuracy. The next field we're going to talk about is the annual leave eligibility date field down here at the bottom. This is not a new field, but the title has been updated to make it a little bit more clear as to what should be in this field. This field is required for all absence management agencies and drives the annual leave accrual rate. For our non-absence management agencies, you should also use this field as the data entered here will populate into a new employment instance if the employee transfers to another agency. This field is required. It's a required field when the previous state service months, it's field over here on the right, and the veteran service credit months fields are used, okay? The field right under. Otherwise, there will be a people code error upon trying to save without populating the annual leave eligibility date, okay? This is important as this field is required to manually calculate, and the data the data that's entered here per DHRM annual leave policy requirement is that the date is used to adjust when the employee encounters any type of extended leave without pay events, okay? All right, the next field we're going to go over is the previous state service months. This is the same field as the prior service months, but the title has been changed, again, to make it more clear as to what information should be housed there. It is only for prior state salaried service, okay, for employees that had prior state salaried service. Agencies will populate the months of eligible prior service for rehires whenever there's a break in service. Now, if you have any questions about what types of prior service are eligible for this credit, you'll need to visit the respective DHRM policy, or you can ask your additional questions by emailing policy@dhrm.virginia.gov. Next field we're going to go over is the Veteran Service Credit Months field. This is one of the new fields that was created to distinguish the employee's prior state service months and the Veteran Service Credit Months for reporting and accurate VSDP leave allotment processing and absence management. The next new field that we have is our Total Service Credit Months field. This is a field that's automatically generated based on the information added in the previous statements field, as well as the Veteran Service Service Credit Month field. This total service credit months will be used to adjust the annual leave eligibility date field. Okay. Some additional PeopleSoft delivered fields to call out are outlined in green, but these fields are automatically generated and they do not require any manual entry at all. Okay. First field we're going to go over is our company seniority date field. Again, this is automatically generated upon save based on what HR administrators enter in the annual leave eligibility date field. This field impacts the annual leave accrual rate and carryover amounts in absence management modules. The next field that we're going to talk about that's in green, another automatically generated field, is the last assignment start date field. This will match the original start date and is the earliest start date the employee was hired into this particular agency or business unit. And the last field we're going to cover today is the first assignment start date. This field will match the original or last start date in this particular business unit for the employee. Yes, these fields are delivered and can also be repetitive. Therefore, we do not use them in reports. We should be focusing on the fields outlined in red and blue. These fields have downstream impacts to other module areas and for reporting purposes. Again, I'll just call out that we do have a job aid, and at the end of that job aid is a table that lists all the fields on this page and what they are used for. So I do recommend you go take a look at that job aid. That's the HR 351 Managing Service Dates and Breaks in Service job aid. And again, if you have any questions about these dates or which dates to use for these service date fields, agencies should contact DHRM and or VRS. All right, let's move on to the next slide.
I'd like to go ahead and pause, Sam. We have a couple of questions coming in that I'm going to get folks to address related to who needs to make these updates. So I'm looking across at Kelly and Natalie. If you're an agency that's not a payroll agency, do you need to make these adjustments?
Well, it doesn't matter really whether or not you're a payroll agency. What matters is whether or not you have salary classified employees that are receiving veteran service credit and or are eligible for annual leave service date revisions.
All right, so what about agencies who are payroll agencies, but they are not absence management agencies? How does this impact them?
I think the same would be true. Do you have employees who are eligible for this benefit? And if so, you should be entering it into Cardinal manually, as those employees may very well transfer to another agency that is an AM agency, and the data in these fields will convert to the new employment record when they're hired into another agency.
All right, great, thank you. We have one more question that came in about going back over these fields. I do want to move us along because we have so much to cover. There are screenshots that were attached in the communication that went out yesterday, and then you're also going to be looking at the job aid that Sam referenced. So let's go ahead and have her move in to our next slide.
Thank you, Jolene. And to that final question, we do have an overview of these date fields that are in this deck. We're not going to go through these fields again because we just covered them, but it has more information. So I recommend that you go ahead and print out, if not the whole deck, at least these next couple slides, because it does break down the fields, giving you the name and description and some more detailed information for you to consider when you're making your adjustments in Cardinal. All right, so slide 7, 8, 9, and 10. Oh, and 11 would be a good slides to print out and keep at the desk aid as you're making these adjustments. All right, moving along, we're going to talk about service field impact in absence management. And I'm going to go ahead and let Susie Hilton here at the Cardinal team handle that for you because she is the best one to do so. There you go, Susie.
All right, thank you, Sam. So I am here, as Sam said, today to talk about the impacts that these updates that are being made in job data how they're going to impact absence management. So absence management administrators, you have access to job data as view only. So you have view only access to this job data page. So this is the job data page this is the same screenshot that Sam was just showing. But here I'm wanting to highlight 2 things. I'm wanting to highlight here the company seniority date and the VSDP sick and personal leave effective date and these years and months that you see in this screenshot. Having access to job data in a read-only capacity is really helpful for you as an absence administrator, especially in situations like this, when there's been a change in policy that may require you to take a closer look at your employees' absence balances. So if you're concerned about your employees' absence balances, such as VSDP sick, VSD personal, entitlement amounts, or vacation, or their vacation accrual rate, this is where you're going to want to go to check to make sure that their job data is correct or that it is consistent with what you expect or what the employee is expecting. You'll want to take a look at that company seniority date. This is the date that's driving the vacation accruals. So in this screenshot, we can see that the employee here has 2 years and 9 months. So what this means is that this employee would have 4 hours of vacation accrual each pay period. And then and this is the date, like I said, this is what drives that vacation accrual. When veteran service credits or previous state service months are added, the company seniority date is going to be impacted. The VSDP sick and personal leave date, when this is updated, this is going to be updated when the previous state service months are added, and this is the date that drives VSDP sick and VSD personal. This is what's driving those entitlements that the employee is receiving at the beginning of the leave year. If you notice that these dates, years and months of service don't match what you or the employee is expecting to see, that's resulting in absence balances that or accruals that are unexpected, then you're going to want to reach out to your HR administrator. Your HR administrator will then review any documentation that they have, and they will review the employee's job data and make any updates that are needed. When those updates are then made in job data, then absence calc will run. Absence calc runs every night, and it will recalculate the employee's absence balances. And we're going to talk a bit more about that later on. But here on this just first initial slide, I just wanted to let you know, remind you, if you haven't been to job data before, that you do have access as AM administrators to view this page, and it is helpful to take a look at the company seniority date and the VSDP sick and personal date, years, months, and days of service as you are reviewing your employees' information. All right, so I'm going to turn back over to Sam.
Thank you, Susie. All right, our next slide, we're going to go over the calculator that you're going to use to manage these service dates and calculate this information. First, we're going to review what the calculator slides look like, right? But then we're going to jump into the calculator and actually do a demonstration for our first scenario with the actual calculator. All right, the calculator probably looks familiar to you. It was a previous calculator that was posted on the Cardinal website. And that calculator was called the HR 351 Impact of Breaks in Service Calculator. That calculator has been removed from the website, and this calculator was revised to due to these updates for managing service dates, and is now titled the HR 351 Managing Service Dates Calculator. There are 4 tabs on the calculator. The first tab being the instructions tab, which is generally what how our spreadsheets look for Cardinal. The next 3 tabs we're going to talk about are the important tabs for using the calculator, starting with tab number 2, which is the previous date service months calculator. This is where you're going to add the hire and termination dates for every time the employee was a salaried state employee, okay? And this is going to help you calculate their previous state service months for you. You're going to enter the information or the dates in the green boxes, as you see on the screen. And the spreadsheet is going to do the calculations for you on the right-hand side under the total previous date service months, as well as the total previous date service. If you are trying to click in a field and you're not able to access it, that usually means that it is locked. Only the fields that you should be entering data into are open and editable for employees. And let's go to the next slide.
And where can users find this calculator?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked. The calculator can be found on the Cardinal Project website.
And we link that later on in these slide deck, correct?
Yes, Jolene, we do link that later on in this slide deck. But if you have been with us for a while, you should be familiar with that Cardinal Project website, because that is where the bulk of all your resources are located. All right, so moving along, the next tab that we're going to talk about is the months of veteran service calculator. This tab you can use separately to calculate any service dates for the employee, so you can get the calculation of their months. Please note that these calculators do round up automatically for you, as seen here. In this example, we have 8 years, which is 96 months plus 29 days, rounding out to 97 months of total military service. And then the last tab that we're going to discuss is the annual leave eligibility tab, or tab 4. This particular tab, or part of the spreadsheet, has 2 separate fields, one for previous state service months and the other field for veteran service credit months. This tab of the calculator has been changed to incorporate the separation of those 2 fields. Okay. You can use this tool to determine the annual leave eligibility date, as well as confirm any existing annual leave eligibility date that has been added to the employee's job record. Okay, it automatically adjusts that date. All right, so now we're going to talk about our first scenario. And in this particular scenario, we are going to actually use the calculator that I have previously downloaded from the Cardinal Project website, just to demonstrate how it's used and how we're going to calculate this first scenario. All right, for our first scenario, we have adding veteran service credit to an existing employee. Our employee is Daffy Duck, and again, she's an existing employee that has turned in her DD 214 or his DD 214 for veteran service credit. The HRM will need to add the veteran service credit months and adjust the annual leave eligibility date, if necessary, to impact the employee's vacation accrual. Okay, so we see Daffy Duck, we have our employee, his employee ID. We have the current hire date. Currently, Daffy has 48 months of previous service that is already added onto the employee's job record, and we'll see that when we jump into the system. And Daffy has a current annual leave eligibility date of February 10th, 2014. Again, Daffy submitted their DD 214 and was approved for veteran service credit between January 3rd of 2001 to January 15th of 2011. Let's go ahead and get out of the deck and jump into our testing environment. And before we do that, again, this is the Cardinal Project website where you can find the calculator as well as the job aids. You'll go under the Learning tab, under Job Aids, and you can search by module, Human Resources, or type in a keyword to find the particular job aid that you are looking for. So if I search by calculator, I should see that new calculator pull up for us. Right. All right, so let me go ahead and sign in. And before we jump into the system, actually, I want to pull up the calculator so that we can take Daffy Duck's information and actually enter it into the calculator. So again, the first tab on the calculator is the instructions tab. If it's your first time using it, I suggest you go ahead and just take a quick review of these instructions. And the next tab is the previous state service month calculator. For this example, we've already calculated the previous state service months, but if we wanted to confirm the information, we could go ahead and use that, this portion of the calculator, but we're not going to do that for this scenario. But we are going to take the information for Daffy Duck's veteran service credit and enter it on the calculator just to calculate the months of veteran service credit that Daffy Duck is approved for. So I'll go ahead and enter in the first date, the begin service date. And then my end service date. And tab out. And I see that we now have 120 months of veteran state service for the employee. All right. And the last tab for Daffy, we could go ahead and enter the previous months of service, which we know from the slide that it was 48 months. And the veteran service months that we just calculated, we'll enter that information in the veteran service months section. And tab out, that will automatically calculate our total service credit months that we can confirm from the employee's job record. We could enter the current payroll period. And for this example, we're going to use the payroll period of April 25th, 2023. And if Daffy had any pay periods with leave without pay, we would calculate that information in here, but Daffy does not. So therefore, we see our annual leave eligibility date adjusts to February 10th of 2004. So with this information, I'll go ahead and enter that into Daffy Duck's job record, updating Daffy's job record with the Veteran Service Months. All right, I'll grab our navigator and we are going to navigate to the job record. If you are not familiar with the navigation, it is in the job aid, but everything for HR pretty much starts in Workforce Administration. And because we're going to the job record, we're going into job information and then into job data. Okay, I'm going to enter in Daffy's employee ID. And then click on the Include History checkbox so I can see any historical rows behind. And then click the Search button. All right. Now Daffy's job record comes up and we see the most current row is a data change effective March 1st, 2023. And we can scroll down to the bottom, click on the employment data hyperlink to go to the employment information page to review Daffy's person employment dates that are currently in the system, as well as the VSDP sick per leave effective date and the VSDP enroll date. So we see down in the person employment date section that Daffy's continuous state service date is 2/10/2018, and Daffy's annual leave eligibility date is actually 2/10/2014. We will need to adjust that date. We see the previous state service months have already been entered on Daffy's record, but now we need to enter in the veteran service credit months. So to do that, we're going to go back to the work location tab by clicking on the job data hyperlink. And on the work location tab, we'll add a row. And we'll backdate this transaction back to that March 1st date. We see we have a warning. This warning is just saying that this transaction is more than 30 days in the past. We already know that, so we'll go ahead and select OK. And we'll increment our effective sequence to 1 since we're using a date that was previously used on the previous row. The action is going to stay data change, but our reason is actually going to be leave eligibility date. And now we'll scroll down to the bottom so we can click back on the employment data hyperlink to take us back to the employment information page. Then I'm going to grab my information just so make sure I put it in accurately. And I will enter in Daffy's veteran service credit of 120 months. And I'm also going to adjust the annual leave eligibility date. If there was any adjustments that needed to be made on this page, now would be a great time to do that. But for Daffy's scenario, there are no other adjustments that need to be made. So I'll go ahead and click on the Save button. And after you save, you want to make sure that you confirm the VSDP sick as well as the total service credit months calculate after saving. Okay. Now there's one more step that we need to do before we move on to our next employee. we'll go back to our job data page, our work location tab. And now we want to record the changes that we made on the notepad using the notepad feature in Cardinal. So I'll click on the notepad icon to access the notepad. Then I'll click on add a new note button. And I will enter in a subject, something like this, but obviously you would want to follow your agency's guidance on what you should include on this page. Once you're done, you'll click on Save. And then to return back to the Work Location tab, you'll click on the Job Data page hyperlink here at the very bottom. And your note will be saved. Remember that when you're entering information on the notepad, you want to make sure that it's non-confidential information, and you want to follow your agency's guidance on what should be written on that notepad. All right, now let's jump back in the deck so Susie can go over what happens in AM after HR admins make these changes.
Right, thank you, Sam. So, okay, so in this screenshot here, in this table here, we can see the employee's hire date. We can see the job data transaction date. This is the date that Sam used when she created that new job data row. Here notated also, we have the VSDP sick and personal hours that this employee is receiving. So 72 hours and 72 sick and 32 personal hours. And the employee was accruing 5 hours of vacation per pay period. And the employee had a vacation balance of 116 hours. Sam went in as the HR administrator and updated the employee's veteran service credits. Veteran service credits only impact vacation accrual. They are not going to touch the VSDP sick or VSDP personal entitlement hours that the employee would receive at the beginning of the leave year or as a new hire or rehire. So when the veteran service credits are added, just as Sam added those, as you notice, there was nothing in that field previously. There was a 0 there. When Sam added the veteran service credit hours and then saved the job data record, that then created a trigger. Now, typically, a trigger is going to be set with a date that reflects that job data transaction date. So in this case, it would have been 3/10/2023, and that would trigger absence calc to reprocess the employee's balances using that job data effective date. But because this particular change is due to a policy change, Cardinal there's a SQL that is going to be running to change that date of that trigger so that absence calc will reprocess all the way back to 1/10/2023. So that's what you can see here. So once your HR administrator makes that change and enters something in that veteran service credit field, that is going to alert Cardinal that this employee's absence balances need to be recalculated all the way back to the policy effective date, which is 1/10/2023. Absence calc runs every night. So once absence calc runs overnight, then the employee's balances are going to be recalculated. So here we'll be able to see that based on the job data updates, the employee's vacation accrual is going to increase from 5 hours to 7 hours. And this Cardinal is going to recalculate the employee's absence balances to give them those additional vacation accrual hours for starting in January. So that gives this employee now 134 hours, whereas prior to this change of adding the veteran service credit, the employee had 116 hours. So anytime the HR administrator goes in and enters the veteran service credits for the first time, that's going to trigger absence calc that night to reprocess the employee's absence balances. And AM administrators, you would then be able to go in that next day, so the day following the HR administrator updating job data, the very next day after absence calc runs, you will be able to go into the results by calendar or results by calendar group pages and review the updated absence balances. Now, just as a reminder, the employees are not going to be able to see those absence balance updates in employee self-service until the pay period is finalized. So think about that next pay period. That's what, or sorry, the next payday. That's when your employee will be able to see the updated absence balances through employee self-service. But the balances will be available for them that very next day after absence calc has run. So you can review those absence balances as an absence administrator the same way that you do today, either by running reports or going to the results by calendar or calendar group pages to review those updated absence balances after absence calc has run.
All right, thank you, Susie. So our next scenario, scenario 2, is for Elmer Fudd. We have a rehire. Elmer Fudd has had previous state service that counts towards his VRS. And he also has veteran service credit that we need to add to his job. So Elmer just came back to the state on February 25th of 2023. And we gathered his previous state service, whether it was via his personnel file, looking into PEMIS, the legacy system, and or calculating the information that is housed on VRS. Okay, so we've gathered all that information. Elmer Fudd has already been added into the system, but at the time of the hire transaction, we didn't have this information. So now we're going to go back into the system. We're going to use this information, calculate it in the calculator, and then we're going to go back into the Cardinal system and add this information to his job record. Okay. So let me grab his calculator and I'll pull Elmer Fudd's over. So starting with our first tab, we're going to enter in the hire information. So in the green section, which is the section that we can edit, we're going to enter in the first hire date of October 10th of 1994 with a termination date of December 25th, 1996. And Elmer also has another hire date of March 10th of 1998. And then a termination date of October 10th, 2019. And when I tab out of this field, my number should adjust, giving Elmer Fudd 286 months of previous state service. So he has been here for a while. Next, we're going to go to the third tab and calculate the veteran service dates. Elmer has had veteran service and submitted his DD 214 to us based on the changes that were made to the policy. And we have gotten his approved date, so we're going to enter that information into this section, starting with the begin service date. So based on his approved service credit, his begin service date is May 10th, 1990. And his end date is going to be April 30th. Of 1994. Now, obviously, we could calculate this ourselves, but we have a calculator to do it for us, so might as well make sure that we are accurate. And with these 2 dates, we have 48 months of veteran service for Elmer Fudd. Next, we'll go to our final tab where we're going to calculate, use the previous service months from tab 2 and the veteran service months from tab 3 to calculate the adjusted annual leave eligibility date. So I know that Elmer was, his employee record hire date or rehire date is February 25th of 2023. And our previous date months, I can grab from the previous screen, but that's 286 for that year. And our veteran service months from our previous screen is 48. So we'll grab that information and enter it in here. Once I tab out, my total service credit months adjusts, and we can enter in the current payroll date. And based on today's date, I'll use the date of April 25th again. And tab out of that field. If Elmer had any pay periods in which he was on leave without pay, we would adjust this date, but he does not. But if he did, let me just show you how the annual leave eligibility date adjusts. So let's add 2 pay periods and tab out. And we see our annual leave eligibility date adjusts. Take that out for the purposes of this demonstration and change it back to 0. Tab out. Our annual leave eligibility date should be 4/25/1995. All right, so with this information, we're going to go ahead and navigate to Elmer's job record and make the necessary corrections to his record. Let me go ahead and grab Elmer's ID. So now we're on Elmer Fudd's job record, and we see the hire transaction. That is the only transaction on his job record, rightfully so, because it's just hired. So this is the current transaction. And for this update, we're going to use the hire date because we are going to enter in his person employment date information, right? We didn't have that information, just made those calculations. So we're going to enter in all this information down here. Again, we would want to make sure our VSVP enroll date is accurate. I've previously populated that, but if that wasn't there, you want to make sure that you include that information. Okay. Let's go back to the work location tab. We're going to add a row, and using that 225 date, we'll increment our effective sequence to 1. Again, we get our warning and click OK. And next, we're going to update our action. Again, we're going to use that data change action. And our reason, again, is going to be leave eligibility date. This is that reason code that is specific for these changes. And we'll navigate back to our employment information page and make the necessary updates. Continuous date service, again, is going to be the hire date for that business unit, right? So we're going to use that 2/25/23 date. Okay. And then for Elmer, we have 48 months of previous date service. So we'll replace the 0 to 48. Our veteran service credit months is going to be replaced. Oops, sorry, that's veteran service credit months. So our previous months of service was 286, I believe. Yep, 286 months. And then our veteran service credit months was 48. Then we did adjust our annual leave eligibility date. So our new annual leave eligibility date is, we'll enter that here, and that is April 25th of 1995. Okay. Again, once I save, these dates up here will auto-generate. Pay attention to the VSDP sick or leave effective date, as well as our company seniority date. So our company assert seniority date adjusts appropriately based on the coding behind it, and our VSDP per sick date adjusts as well. All right.
Should we always use a last effective date showing the leave update transaction, adding that new sequence number?
All right, let's repeat that question. I'm not sure everybody heard that.
You want to repeat it, Julie? Question is, so we should always use the last effective date showing for the leave update transaction, adding that new sequence number?
Great question. It depends. And I'm gonna hand that question off to Kelly Bonner to go ahead and add some clarity to that.
So from an HR, and I put my DHRM hat on, I would say that the HR practice is to use the effective date in which the HR office received and approved the veteran service paperwork. You are putting a note, you are adding a job data row to the record. You are adding a note to the record indicating, when you've received and are adding this data. Therefore, you should use the effective date in which that data was approved. The system is going to, retroactively trigger the leave eligibility back to January 10th of the year in which it is being processed. But from an HR standpoint, we should be using the effective date in which the paperwork has been received and approved, because that's what we do in HR, correct? Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
We've had a couple of questions come in about confusion around the VSDP enroll date on the last scenario.
It's not the enroll date, it's the VSDP sick and personal effective date.
Okay.
And that date gets automatically updated whenever the annual leave eligibility date and the veteran service months are populated.
And I'm going to go to that page again. The VSDP enroll date is when the employee enrolls into this program. But the field that Kelly is talking about that you want to pay attention to is this VSDP sick personal leave effective date.
That is the field. The VSDP sick and personal leave effective date is being automatically triggered and populated based upon the information that is entered and saved in the annual leave eligibility date. Highlight that down there, please, Sam.
Yep, right here.
Okay, and the veteran service credit months. So your annual leave eligibility date is not going to be the same as your VSDP sick and personal effective date, because employees do not get veteran service months credit towards VSDP sick and personal leave, which is the purpose behind us adding these fields and creating these calculations behind the scenes in Cardinal.
All right, one more question before as Sam's getting ready to move on. Doesn't VSDP leave effective date reset after 30 days of term?
I assume that the data is zeroed out by the absence management administrator after someone terminates their job, because the VSDP sick and personal is not paid out, but it should be zeroed out in case that person ever comes back to the agency. You would want to start with zero balances in those fields.
All right, we'll see if there's any adjustment to that response. Thank you, Kelly, and follow up if necessary. So back to Sam. I know you have a lot to show us.
All right, thank you, Jolene and Kelly. All right, so again, after we make our transaction changes for these dates, we would want to go and capture that information on the notepad. So I'm gonna go ahead and open that back up just in case anybody wasn't paying attention. This is how you access the job data notepad. It is only available once the transaction is saved. So you have to save the transaction first and then add your note, okay? You add a new note by clicking on the button, entering your subject, as well as your note text. Okay. I'm not going to do that here for time purposes, but go back to the job data page. And I think that's all I wanted to cover on this. So we will jump right back into our deck. All right. So again, we just saw how we would add previous months of service and veteran service credit to a rehire, a recent rehire. Okay. And again, because we just rehired them and we already completed the hire transaction, we're going to use that effective date of the hire to add those service dates, right? If there was a transaction in the way of the hire transaction, we would use the that effective date of that current row. All right, now I'm going to hand it off to Susie to go over the impacts to absence management.
Okay, so you'll notice that we didn't have a lot of data that was entered previously, because in this scenario of this rehire, the HR administrator at the time of the hire didn't have the prior years of service or the veteran service credit. So none of that had been keyed yet. So that's why there's nothing, like in the previous example, you had here are the balances prior to the entries. Well, in this scenario, nothing had been keyed previously, so there's nothing to compare to. But what you can see here is that based on the employee's years of prior service and veteran service credits, the vacation accrual per pay period for this employee is going to be 9 hours per pay period. That would give the employee a vacation balance of 45 hours at this time, system date of May 9th, 2023. VSDP sick and VSDP personal of 64 hours and 32 hours following DHRM's policy, new hire or rehire policy. Because nothing had been keyed yet in that veteran service date field, when this was keyed and this job data was saved, Absence Calc is going to pick up these changes and calculate the employee's absence balances. Again, as an AM administrator, you will be able to review these absence balances the following day, just after Absence Calc has run. So first thing the next morning, you will be able to see those updated absence balances for your employee. Again, just another reminder, the employee is not going to be able to see these absence balances reflected in employee self-service until the pay period has finalized. And so we usually tell employees to think about that as far as like their next payday. So on their next payday, they can go back into employee self-service and they'll be able to see their updated absence balances. So in this case, because the employee was hired on 2/25/2023, Cardinal is going to calculate the absence balances back to that date of hire. So for our previous employee, the employee had already been hired and had been in the system. So Cardinal recalculated back to 1/10/2023, the beginning of the leave year. But in this case, the employee was not an active employee until 2/25/2023. So that is the date that absence calc is going to use to recalculate their absence balances.
All right, thank you, Susie. So our next slide is next steps for HR and absence management administrators. This information was captured in the comm that went out last night. But again, it is here for you to review as you're making your adjustments in Cardinal for your employees. But our agency immediate actions, these actions must take place as soon as possible preferably before the legislative increase that is about to come, about to be captured in Cardinal. First, you're going to determine if your agency has applied the Veteran Service Credit months to the previous state service months field and revise that annual leave eligibility date as per the guidance that was previously given when the policy changes occurred in January. If your agency did not make any updates or adjustments for Veteran Service Credit in Cardinal, you will follow the steps outlined in the HR 351 Managing Service Dates and Breaks in Service Job Aid. Again, going back to somebody's question about effective date used, in that job aid is going to cover that information a little bit more detailed. And going forward, as you're adding new hires or rehires into the system, you're going to want to follow that guidance on the job aid. Okay. For HR admins at agencies who have not completed those adjustments, again, we're following the job aid and you're making sure that you're getting it completed by June 10th due to that upcoming legislative salary increase transaction. And for our absence management admins, if you have not manually adjusted any balances or absence balances, no changes are needed for you. So you're going to collaborate with your HR admins, and when your HR administrator makes their updates, the system will automatically update leave entitlements in absence management if they need to make any updates. Our next slide covers if you did make some adjustments or applied some changes to Veteran Service Credit in Cardinal. For HR admins at the agency, if you have applied your Veteran Service Credit months to that previous state service months field and revised the employee's annual leave eligibility date, you must make updates to these employees' job data records. You're going to have to identify those employees at your agency. The steps you will take are based on the option you select below. So please see what's best fits your agency situation. Again, we have a little reminder about the June 10th legislative salary increase, so we want to take action as soon as possible. And I'll go ahead and pause. Do we have a question or a comment?
I just wanted to jump in here and talk really quickly about if you've already applied those changes for the Veteran Service Credit months, and you are going to need to, you're making those corrections to that. From an absence management perspective, once the job data is updated, its absence calc, like we talked about, is going to be triggered, and it's going to run and process and recalculate those absence balances. So if maybe based on what was keyed earlier, the employee's VSDP, personal and sick entitlements were not accurate, then based on the new data that has been keyed and that trigger that's been set, Cardinal's going to go back and reprocess and update the employees' absence balances and give them the correct VSDP, personal VSDP sick, and vacation accrual. So all of that's going to happen automatically once job data is corrected and that veteran service credit field is populated.
All right, thank you, Susie. Anything else? Any comments or questions we need to address now? Nope. All right. And Susie?
All right, so here we just want to remind you, as AM administrators, you want to be collaborating with your HR administrators to identify any employees that are impacted and whose job data may need to be updated so that their absence balances or entitlements can be corrected as well. Once job data has been updated, absence calc is going to run that night. So that next day, like I've mentioned a couple of times here, that's when that following day you will be able to view on the results by calendar page, results by calendar group, or you can run the employee leave report to review those absence balances. So whichever way you're reviewing absence balances today, you'll be able to use those same resources to review absence balances after absence calc has run following that job data update. If you have already created a manual balance adjustment to compensate, so let's say that you notice that your employees' balances were not accurate after this policy went into effect, maybe their VSDP personal or sick hours were not accurate, or you notice that they were not accruing the vacation hours that they should be accruing based on their veteran service credits, and you made a manual balance adjustment to accommodate for that. If you have done that, the AM administrator will need to remove that manual balance adjustment. So you're going to go to the calendar period where that balance adjustment was made and delete that manual balance adjustment. The reason that you need to delete the manual balance adjustment is because as HR is making once HR makes the update to job data, then Cardinal is going to recalculate their absence balances. And if you have given them an adjustment and now Cardinal is also giving them that entitlement or giving them those additional vacation hours based on what they're eligible for, then they could have that duplicate or those additional accruals or additional hours. So you want to make sure that if you did any of those manual balance adjustments to compensate for those prior years of service or those veteran service credits, please remember to go in and to make that adjustment, or to delete that adjustment that you made. It's really important, and I think Sam and I have kind of talked through this today during this this forum, but it's really important that the HR admins and the AM administrators are communicating to make sure that the employee is also aware of these changes. So working together as administrators is really important to get these updates made, and then also to communicate the changes to your employees. And again, I've mentioned this a few times, absence management administrators can see those updated absence balances the very next day after the HR admin has updated job data. Employees will not be able to see those balances, their updated balances, until the pay period has been finalized, so their next payday.
All right, thank you, Susie. So yes, it is a collaborative effort. So teamwork makes the dream work. And we're going to work with our administrators to make sure that the employee's information is correct. All right, our next slide is going over the options for corrections. This is for our agencies who followed the January 10th guidance, and now we need to go back in and update the employee's record. So first, we're going to talk through the steps that you'll need to take. Again, this is mentioned in the comm that was sent out last night, I believe. And then I'm going to demo these specific steps. We've pretty much already seen this, right? So it's one more time we're seeing this, but it is for your benefit. So to answer any of those questions about the effective date you use and how to actually correct this data. All right. We do have two options for you to make corrections. Let's go over the option 1 first. This is for the agencies that will manually update the previous state service months and veteran service credit months. You'll refer to your HR documentation for the employee to determine any leave eligibility date adjustments, right? You can also use your calculator to confirm those dates, that leave eligibility date. And as well as calculating the months of veteran service credit for the employee. Again, you'll add a new job data row as we do when we make any change in HR on the job record, we add a row. For our changes that are entered in the system, and the current row is in the current leave year, you're going to use the same effective dated row as the current row or top of stack. And then you're going to enter in that effective sequence of 1. If the employee's last effective dated row is not in the current leave year, you're going to use that January 10th, 2023 date. Okay. That way, if the employee's accruals calculate back appropriately. You're going to use that action of data change in the reason code of leave eligibility date. You'll click on the employment data hyperlink as we saw previously. You'll enter only the veteran service credit months to that new field. And if veteran service credit months were added to previous state service months field, you'll subtract those months from that field. Please note only the employee's prior service months related to their state salaried prior service. Again, state salaried prior service should be in the previous state service months field. Okay, salaried service, not hourly. Next, the annual leave eligibility service date adjustment should be included, and it should include the total service credit months. If accurate, if it's already accurate on the employee's record, you won't need to change it. But again, you can confirm by using the calculator. Once you've entered this information, you'll save the record. You'll verify the VSDP sick personal leave effective date and total service credit months. This change will update that VSDP sick per leave effective date when absence calc runs, which will trigger a recalculation of the VSDP balances in accordance with the employee's applicable years of service under the VRS VSDP policy. Then you will click on the job data hyperlink to navigate back to our work location tab so that you can enter a note on the changes that you made on the notepad icon. You'll click on the icon, click the add note button, add your subject and note text to document why the person employment dates were updated. Okay, just in case someone else picks up this record and is wondering what happened, why did you make that transaction? Okay. Then you'll click save again and notify your absence management administrator of your changes so that they can confirm the entitlement adjustments on the following day. All right, let's see what this looks like. This demonstration, we are going to use our friend Speedy Gonzalez. So Speedy, his HR admin followed the guidance from January and added his veteran service credit to his prior service months. And now we need to subtract them and put the veteran service credit months in the correct field, as well as confirm the annual leave eligibility date or adjust it accordingly, okay? So for purposes of time, I've already made these calculations in the calculator, so I have this information for my demo. So I'm not going to show you that. So we'll go back to our job data page, and again, we're going to add our row. We're going to use our 214 date. Most of your employees will probably have some type of effective dated row, especially if the changes were made for telework, right? So you're going to see, you'll probably see a effective data row within the lead year. So most of your changes are going to be using the previous current row's effective date. Okay. We're going to use the action of data change, and we're going to change our reason to leave eligibility date. Scroll down and click on our hyperlink to go to employment data page. And we have our continuous state service. We'll confirm that that is accurate, which it is. And our previous state service months, we need to remove 60 months of veteran service credit from our previous state service months. So we will go ahead and remove that. That'll make 180, 120. And then we'll add the 60 months in veteran service credit. And we'll confirm that the employee's annual leave eligibility date is accurate, which it is. It is still February 10th of 2006. Okay. So I'll go ahead and make sure that if there was any other corrections on this page, it's probably a good time to do it before I save. Well, once we save the page, we'll see our VSDP sick per leave effective date has updated. Our company's seniority date has updated. And our total service credit months have recalculated. Again, we'll go back to our job data hyperlink so that we can capture the changes in our notepad. So for Speedy, we're going to, again, enter something like employment data changes. And advise what was changed. Okay. Save that information. And return to our job data page. All right, I'll pause there and see if we have any questions before I move on. Okay. All right, so let's jump back into our deck and talk about option 2. So we do have a second option, and this option is for agencies with a large volume of corrections to make. So if you were gasping for breath, know that we are here to help you if you have a large volume of changes, okay? So if you have 50 or more corrections to make, you're going to contact Cardinal PPS HR team or the DHRM iHelp team to assist you with your corrections, okay? And you'll do that by submitting a ticket to VCCC as you normally would, and include in the subject line Cardinal HR Veteran Service Credit Corrections, so we know where to route that particular ticket, okay? You must attach a spreadsheet of impacted employees. We don't have that information. You got to give that to us. And you must include an employee ID, an effective date, veteran service credit months, and prior state service months, so that we can help you get this information in the system quickly. All right. I know we have covered some questions and answers already, but now is Q&A time.
First question. This is it looks like a follow-up question, but I think I have the second part of that. I believe our veterans documents were received in most cases on or before 1/10/2023. So will we use the 1/10/23 as the effective date in this case?
Yes, the policy was effective 1/10/2023, so it should be effective dated as of the effective date of the policy and not before.
Perfect. Now, if there are later dates, say we receive something on 2/10, can I enter an earlier record, or should I use the effective date of 2/10?
You can certainly use the effective date of 2/10 for that. I mean, it's still going to trigger your leave eligibility date accrual rate back to 1/10, the beginning of the leave year. You can use the top of stack if it's easiest for you, and make a note in the notepad that you are correcting the data that was entered on 1/10 if you previously made that transaction on 1/10.
All right, so it sounds like we're really recommending that agencies decide what they want to do, but for people who were employed as of 1/10, it's going to retro back to that 1/10 date.
The annual leave eligibility will retro back to 1/10 when the record is saved and absence calc has been run, has been processed.
All right, great. Totally different direction. Is there any guidance available for non-payroll interfacing agencies regarding what is required and how the data feed files should be adjusted?
So the veteran service credit months field has not been added to the HR 003 job data interface program yet. We did not determine that this would be heavily enough of a usage in order to incur such a significant change to the interface program. If at a later date we determine that it does need to be added, then we will notify the interfacing agencies and add the field. Therefore, if you have employees that where you have veteran service credit and you need to enter it into Cardinal, maybe they're classified employees and they're going to possibly transfer to another agency, that data will convert to the new import record. Therefore, you may very well want to enter the data in there so that that data gets to the next agency. At some point, DHRM may be looking for that data set in reporting, as this is a state policy affecting all classified and salaried employees, and there is a reporting requirement. And Natalie could reiterate the reporting requirement.
I think you just spoke to it, but yes, if the data is in the system, then we'll be able to report on it. If not, I mean, agencies are going to need to be accountable. So we would just encourage agencies with classified employees to ensure that the data is there and available in the system.
We have a couple of questions revolving around VSDP enroll dates that are blank. Is there a report that HR administrators can run either in Cardinal or elsewhere like VRS or VNAF to determine what this field should be?
I need to get back on that field, the VSDP enrollment date field. I'm not sure that we are populating that field on any reports or queries. I need to check on that and get back on that question. That field is for VRS and regroup usage only. VRS has asked that we emphasize that that is an important field to them. We do extract that data to VRS, and VRS does extract that data to the regroup. That field is used to determine employees' VSDP program eligibility. If they are rehire, you know, for the first year, they got that waiting period, but then after that year, they get full credit for their prior VSDP service, right? So that date should reflect their hire date, you know, when they were enrolled in the VSDP program originally, so that they can get credit for that. That field came from PEMAS. The field was in PEMAS and it was converted from PEMAS. So you may want to check your PEMAS data. If you have blank data in that, if you have blank fields and you've got employees enrolled in the VSDP program and you depend on Cardinal to extract data to VNAV, then you need to research that and update the data in those fields. Again, I need to check and see if that field is populated in any of our queries or reports. And we will answer that in the Q&A responses at a later date.
Right, I think this question is for Natalie. I thought the paperwork, the DD-214, was submitted late. If it was submitted late, then it didn't go back to 110. It started when the DD-214 was submitted. Is that not correct?
So the effective date is going to be the effective date when the agency approved. However, the system is going to go back and calculate. That is a change that the system is going to calculate back to the benefit, the beginning of our leave year, which is the 110, or their hire date if it's after that time period.
Is there a report where I can get who we have already keyed? So for those agencies who had already made changes, how will they figure out they need to make corrections?
We can provide changes as of 1/17/23. We did not capture changes prior to 1/17/23. We ran a report to determine changes that were made as of 1/17. So if you began making changes prior to 1/17, which the guidance requested that you not make any changes until after the absence management program opened back up for the new leave year, which was on the 17th. If you made changes prior to that, we did not capture those changes. But if you made changes on or after 1/17, we can provide you with what fields you did change with your changes. You can send in a ticket and request us to provide that information to you, and we can do that. We took a snapshot of the system on 1/17, but not prior. And these fields that we're talking about today are not effective dated. So therefore, we don't have any historical data on these fields.
All right, If agencies did not add the prior service months to the leave eligibility date, do we need to only update the veteran service field?
Yes. If you updated the annual leave eligibility date only and saved that, and your annual leave eligibility accrual rate and absence management is accurate, then you only need to update the Veterans Service Credit Months field by adding the Veterans Service Credit Months in that field so that you can properly impact the VSTP sick and personal leave effective date field.
Right. Does the deadline apply to non-payroll interfacing agencies to manually adjust records? So we're encouraging, there is a deadline for agencies to get this in before the
June 10th.
June 10th salary
Legislative pay increases.
pay increase, and the legislative pay increases apply to,
All salaried employees.
okay, and we have a forum in 2 weeks for that, so hold off. You're going to get an email communication as well as another form for all of that. But for those who are non-payroll interfacing agencies, they're going to have to manually come into Cardinal to adjust the records. Do they have the same deadline?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And the purpose behind that is that we want these transactions not to be in the way of the 6/10/23 pay increases.
Okay.
And we know that agencies, when agencies start reviewing their data, that they're going to have, corrections to make, changes to make to job data. And, the sooner that you get these corrections in, the less risk of these transactions being in the way of other corrections that you might have to make in order to ensure that all of your data is accurate for the salary increase requirements that will be coming out very soon.
All right. So rounding everything out, we'll go over our resources. We have talked about some of them already, but we have them listed here on this slide for you to access. These resources have hyperlinks in them that'll take you directly to the source. If it is an Excel spreadsheet like the Managing Service Dates Calculator, it will take you right to the job aid section so that you can search for this particular calculator and download the spreadsheet. Obviously, we can't link it to a download. But we did update the new hire, the rehire, the inter-agency transfer, and the intra-agency transfer job aids, just to include the new fields, right? We captured the new fields, but they're pretty much still the same process that's captured in the job aid, just the new fields that were added into Cardinal. One of the most impacted job aids is that Managing Service Dates and Breaks in Service job aid. At the end of this particular job aid is a table that breaks down the fields on that employment information page and tells you or provides you a description on how those fields are used. And then again, we have our calculator. We do have a report that is in Cardinal, and it's called the Years of Service Report. That has been revised to include the new fields, that particular report, and it's going to be a great resource for you to analyze your employment service date. More information about that specific report can be located in the Cardinal HR reports catalog. And the link for this specific report takes you directly to the reports catalog. Lastly, we have a TA 374 results by calendar group and calendar job aid. This particular job aid is not new, nor has it been revised, but it can be used to walk absence management administrators through how to use the results by calendar pages to view absence balances. Okay. For these job aids, you want to make sure to check the revision date at the bottom of the job aid to make sure that you have the most up-to-date job aid. Okay. Also, the impacts to breaks in service calculator and job aid, those are no longer applicable. So if you did download them or bookmark them, go ahead and release those, because those job aid and calculator have been removed from the Cardinal project website. And lastly, if you have not already used the favorites feature in Cardinal, don't forget to utilize that to add your regularly used reports and queries to your favorites so that you can easily access that information. Now let's talk about additional support. As always, we are here to support you. First, you're going to follow your resources within your agency. Okay, you must follow your agency's guidelines on utilizing your agency-centered resources to resolve issues or questions. If you have an answered question or an unresolved issue, you will always have access to, well, I can't say always, but you have access to the CCC help desk. You can submit a ticket by emailing VCCC, and you'll include Cardinal in the subject line, as well as the module area. And in this example, for specific tickets for service dates, you'll include the description service dates in the subject line. Please make sure that you provide as much detail as possible so that the person assigned the ticket will have the information necessary to assist you as quickly as possible. Also, it is imperative that you include your name, email address, and phone number, a good contact number where you can be reached in case there are any questions about the ticket that you have submitted, and if we need any follow-up information. And lastly, DHRM iHelp can help with any specific policy-related questions or assistance on those service dates. And their mailbox and mailing address is located at the bottom of this slide. And that concludes this forum for today. I want to thank everybody for attending and thank all of my counterparts, especially Natalie Brennan from DHRM. And I will send it back over to Jolene to close us out.
All right. Thanks again for joining us today. We appreciate your time and attention. We know you probably have more questions, so take a look at the resources. We just pasted in the link of the email address that you receive Cardinal communications from, as well as we always link it up on the website. So if you go to the Cardinal website and you navigate over to user support, the third option down is communications, and this is where we link big communications. So you can, if you think you missed something or you're just interested in what we sent, you can go back and find that there. Sometimes a little easier than looking through your mailbox. This is a great resource, so it'll directly link to that communication when you hit the red title there on the top. So again, thank you for your time. If you do have any questions, direct them on to the slide as noted, either internally, which one of the first things that you need to do is to discuss internally what has or hasn't been updated by your agency, decide on next steps, who are the responsible parties for making those updates, both from an HR admin standpoint and from an AM admin standpoint, if it's applicable to your agency, and coordinate that. Then make sure you've reviewed all the materials that we have sent you before you start in on that. And after you've reviewed that, if you have questions, please send a communication via email to VCCC for Cardinal, and we'll be able to help direct you or provide additional support. If those questions are more in a policy or a question about eligibility, you'll want to direct those to iHelp. So again, lots of resources. Make sure you review them quickly, especially before we get to that next forum on Tuesday, the 23rd. All of our HR admins who are on this call have likely been invited to our next forum about the legislative salary tool increases. So thanks again. Have a great day.